morning and welcome to Wednesday, January 22nd and the House Transportation Committee. This morning, we're starting off with our with the rail program. Dan Delorier, Delabry, I would get that wrong. I should have practiced before. Dan, we're going to bring you up as well as your guest. You can introduce yourself and your guest for the record, and we will get started in our continued portion of education on the various areas of the Agency of Transportation. And I'll have it right before the end.
Well, good morning. My name is Dan Delabry. I'm the Rail Bureau Director for VTrans, and with me today is Paul Libby, our Senior Project Manager in the Rail Division. Paul is he's the guy that makes me look good behind the scenes. So if you really
And in
want
front of the seats.
and oh yeah. So anyway, well, thank you for having me in this morning. I thought I'd give you folks a quick overview. For some of you who are new, I kind of give you an overview of what the Rail Division does at AOT, what the state owns for rail assets, that kind of stuff. So we'll jump right into it because a lot of people don't know, why do we have railroads? Like what is the railroads? Because they're out in the woods. They're somewhere. A lot of people don't see them, but railroads are extremely important to the state of Vermont. The state of Vermont is positioned between a couple of very major seaports. So the Montreal seaports and then the Atlantic-based seaports in either Boston and Rhode Island. So a lot of rail freight comes in on ships, gets unloaded, gets put on rail cars. And then because of the way the rail network is set up, New Hampshire, years and years and years ago, kind of disconnected a lot of their railroads, but Vermont did not. So Vermont is key to the rail traffic in the entire region. A lot of our railroads here pull a lot of freight, again, from these seaports up and down and through different states in New England. So again, Vermont's positioned pretty well in the middle to do a lot of through traffic, but also we have a bunch of in-state shippers receivers. So to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, there's about 150 to 200 rail cars that move through Vermont every day. Every day, that's you don't see them, but they're moving through Vermont, in and around Vermont. So if we didn't have railroads, what would that mean? That would mean there'd be about 600 to 800 more tractor trailer trucks on our roads every day. That would increase. Think about that as far as how many tractor trailers you drive along the interstate and see. You'd put a lot more on there, and the safety of our travelers and automobiles. You don't want that amount of traffic. So, and typically railroads carry the heavy stuff, right? So the rail cars, they're 286,000 pounds, so they carry a lot of freight at once. So railroads are pretty important to all freight in the entire region, not just Vermont. But when you're talking about Vermont, we own railroads and we lease it to a company called Vermont Rail Systems. In here, I've got it listed as VRS. VRS is a Vermont-based railroad company, and they really target Vermont businesses as far as being shipper receivers. They really they're not looking for 100 cars a day. They'll take the 1 or 2 cars a week from customers, and
You're not showing your slides on the screen. Just.
I thought I was. Okay,
Wow, it was just a great introduction.
No, I'm plugged in. Right. Plugged in. I thought.
Issues here, so.
We had a couple people got done it a couple times and it's picked up the second time.
Is he sharing? Can he, have you given him a share?
I could do it by Zoom.
Yeah, just make sure to mute
Yeah.
that feedback.
All right, so I should unplug this. Thank you for
Okay.
me. I just figured what was behind me. I figured it was going on. All right, so I gotta get out of here. And I gotta get into Zoom now. Through my link, right? Okay. Oh my. Think we can do. Yes, I am not connected to the internet, that's correct. Sorry about that, a little technical difficulty this morning.
First thing. Temperature.
Usually I just plug in and it works.
It's actually balmy down here compared to where Dan and I live. It's 20 below my place. He's probably right in the neighborhood too.
Yeah.
I had 15 below my house, but Greensboro was 22 below coming through Greensboro.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
That's where I'm going this weekend.
It'll be warmer.
be warmer.
It was 10 degrees in Baton Rouge this morning. The entire city is closed. They have no way to move, no way
No
to.
snowplow.
They have no snow plows, they have no salt, they have nothing. They're just completely closed. There's all kinds of, it is a absolute mess and it's gonna be worse. And it'll be 75 by Sunday now. So it'll be a warm mess in a few days, but right now it's a mess.
Seen snow for the first time in their lives in Charleston, South Carolina.
Wow. First time.
Makeshift boots and,
They were sliding on the levees yesterday with cardboard boxes and any kind of plastic they could find and it's quite something.
But they have frozen pipes.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah. It's very lucky that he had to leave when he drove back. He had to leave with a winter coat and all that stuff when you leave here. He didn't need it, but he's one of the few that has it.
Sure.
What did you say? 22 below?
but it wasn't.
My place. He's 22 through Greensboro. Yes.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel that bad because there's no breeze. You can put that wind with it, and then you got a real problem.
Yeah.
It wasn't saying, not.
That was, since we're just having chat, one of those 22, 25 belows and
So
it
you should be able
put the
to
thermostat
carry
at set, you take your indoor temperature, we have the fireplace going at 75 or 80 and it's minus 20. It's over 100-degree difference by that tiny little piece of glass when you think about it.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
The sun is
There you
much
go.
stronger.
Yeah.
We'll feel the sun difference.
At that temperature for sure. Oh, look at this.
Happens quickly.
Oops. Seem to be having trouble with most of our witnesses getting started.
Yeah.
As far.
I don't know why.
We didn't go to slideshow.
Slide thing.
Yeah, normally here, right, you hit this and it says slideshow.
Can you go to view?
There we go. Is that working?
Yes.
Yep.
Holy moly.
Get under that visual. We could bring our old committee mate, maybe we'll have to get Representative Campbell back here to tell us what he did when he kicked it underneath the table.
Disconnected.
All right, this might make more sense with the visuals, everything I was just talking about, so let's kind of take two here a little bit. So as I was saying, I've got this map here that kind of shows the rail network kind of regionally, and you can see some of the railroads in New Hampshire are kind of disconnected, but you can see how a lot of the rail traffic works Montreal and then along the Atlantic seaboard, Rhode Island, Boston, some pretty big shipyards there that bring in some pretty good freight. So railroads are very, very important to the, not just Vermont, but the entire New England. So a lot of rail traffic every single day. So I was talking about VRS, Vermont Rail Systems, they're a Vermont-based company, and they really focus on Vermont companies shipping and receiving within Vermont. So 90% of what they do either originates or terminates in the state of Vermont. And they have over 22,000 rail cars every single year, and their rail traffic's actually going up. So yeah, they're growing. Vermont railroads, not just VRS, but Vermont railroads, there's over 225 Vermont rail employees, not the state of Vermont, but railroad employees so they create a lot of jobs in the state of Vermont. So pretty big employer. But the really thing for the state taxpayers to remember is that railroads provide competitive pricing for a lot of commodities like, our highway division, we use a lot of road salt. All of that road salt comes into the state of Vermont on a rail. So road salt, feed products, fuel oil, propane, stone products, lumber, and really importantly, grain products for all the farmers. So if you look at what moves, those are the major commodities that move in and out of Vermont. And then we also have a couple of passenger services on our rail lines in Vermont. So we have the Vermonter service, and I'll get into that in a minute, and the Econoline service. We'll talk about that a little more, but two passenger services along with the freight that we move. So roads, major impact for the state of Vermont, and people don't really know because it's sort of tough behind the scenes. All right, a little closer to home here. What is looking just at Vermont, not regionally? So the state of Vermont actually is the largest owner of rail property in the state of Vermont. There's 572 miles of active railroad, and the state owns 298 miles of that. And then there's 274 miles that are privately owned that we interact with, but we don't own the infrastructure there. So there's
Representative Powell?
Is it okay to interrupt?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. Just, so those other 274 miles privately owned, they privately own the right of way too? Now, are there any controls on those right of ways?
So they're owned by so I'll give you an example. The New England Central is owned by Genesee and Wyoming. Genesee and Wyoming is the largest short line railroad in the world. So they own New England Central, they own St. Lawrence and Atlantic, and it's all privately owned. We don't own, they own the real estate, they own all the assets, they own the rail cars, they operate it. We do not have a lot of interaction as far as controlling what they do, although we do help them. If there's a project or something that we need to work on, we might be a co-applicant on a grant for them or something like that. So, but we don't own the infrastructure on the privately owned railroads.
Could they sell the railroad and the right of way?
Sure, it's a
Okay.
private business, they
Alright.
could do, sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Representative Powell?
Competitive pricing for moving stone, grain and stuff. It's less expensive to go by rail, Dan?
So the further you go, the more cost effective it is on a rail car. You put it on a rail car, because you can put about, depending on the product, you can put 3 to 4 tractor trailer loads of whatever the commodity is into one rail car. And then you can make that 50 rail cars of that commodity and pulled by 2 locomotives, right? Instead of having 50 trucks, you've got 1 train.
Well,
Yeah, so yes, if you're shipping it a ways, across town, probably not. But if you're shipping it some distance, the rail's the way to go.
and you said you're bringing some of those products in the state out of the area, like salt. Where's that come from?
A lot of the salt comes from like Western New York, Midwest. There's a couple of very large salt mines out there. So,
Thanks.
all right, so back to the map. What do we own and what is privately owned? So if you look at the sort of the bar graph there, the green, the orange, and the kind of the dark blue, those are state owned. So like from Newport to White River Junction, that's called the Washington County Railroad. Right out here behind DMV, there's a railroad. That's also the Washington County Railroad. And then from Rutland down to Rockingham, that's the Green Mountain Railroad. We own that. And then from Burlington down to Bennington and actually into New York, the state of Vermont owns rail property in the state of New York over in Hoosick Junction. So we actually own land in the state of New York. So that's about 298 miles of active railroads. We also own a bunch of rail property that is what's called rail banked and has been turned into the rail trails. And, we have the Missisquoi Valley, the Moyle Valley Trail, the BB Spur, and then the D&H Rail Trail. So those are rail properties that are what's called rail banked. They still could come back as rail properties, but they've been converted into trails and are pretty successful as a trail right now. So we own a bunch of assets. We own a bunch of bridges and crossings and culverts and things. And we have a bridge program that I'm going to get to a little more in a second, but there's 172 rail bridges that we tend to do. Once we get to projects at some point, you're going to hear a lot about bridge projects. It's because 172 of those rail bridges are the responsibility of the state of Vermont. There's also 422 public crossings, and those aren't all on those aren't all on our state-owned rail assets, they're any railroad. There's a regulation that says that we have to maintain these rail highway crossings at a safe, make it a safe crossing. So that's part of our program too. So this is basically what our program consists of assets. 298 miles of rail, 149 miles of rail banked trails, 172 bridges, 422 rail crossings, public rail crossings. There's a bunch of other types of crossings, but like farm crossings and private, but I'm only talking about public crossings here. All right, a little more about our passenger rail. So we do operate, or we do contract with Amtrak through our bureau to run two different passenger services. One is the Ethan Allen, which a couple of years ago, if you remember, we extended it from Rutland up into Burlington. That has been going very well. Ridership is exceeded our predictions there. So Ethan Allen's doing very well. And then the Vermonter, which starts in St. Albans, goes down to Essex Junction, cuts across the state, and then goes down the eastern side through Brattleboro. And this train actually runs all the way to Washington, D.C. every day. So each one of these trains has a northbound and a southbound train every day, 7 days a week. There's 14 station stops in the state of Vermont that you can see here on the map. And both trains are doing very well. So, yeah, we're pretty happy with the Amtrak services right now.
Is there a reason why the green on the Vermonter, is it because it's in New Hampshire?
It actually jumps over into New Hampshire
Okay.
for a bit. It crosses the river. There's actually another stop in New Hampshire in Claremont. So there is actually one more stop that doesn't show on this. It's in the third New Hampshire.
Do we own that?
We don't own it. That's on a privately owned railroad, the New England Central. So we do not own that.
That one section?
We don't own that railroad.
But we don't own.
We own the entire railroad. That entire green railroad is on a privately owned railroad. But we contract with Amtrak to run passenger service
Okay.
over that railroad.
And it's a beautiful ride.
Yeah, it's nice. We several years ago we did what's called CWR, continuously welded rail. We took all the clickety clack. We took all that out, and now it's a nice smooth ride. All right, what are our goals? So currently, the agency goal, provide for a safe and efficient movement of people and goods. We certainly have that in our bureau as something that we keep in mind. And we support economic development through transportation. What I mean by that is, earlier I was talking about, VRS's sort of vision to target shippers, receivers in Vermont. We will sometimes work with either a shipper or receiver through our section to maybe expand a siding or something that'll help, expand the business, increase rail traffic, that sort of stuff. So we're definitely always looking to expand rail service because it's a really efficient and green way to move freight. So,
Representative,
sorry.
I just wanted clarification. Did you say that we improved the privately owned rail for, to make smoother passenger service? I just was wondering how.
Yes. So that was probably 10 or more years ago. There was a grant, an ERA grant, that we were a co-applicant on. And yeah, so that was federal money. Because this is a passenger service, it would definitely improve the Vermonter service, right? So we could increase our speeds on the Vermonter. So that was, yeah, we definitely participated in that grant, even though it was on a privately owned railroad.
Thank you.
I mentioned earlier, 286,000 pound capacity. So that's the freight standard. So when you fully load a car, that's what it weighs. That's one single car. A lot of these rail bridges and our infrastructure were built over 100 years ago. The bridges were not designed at the time for 286,000 pounds. So a lot of what we do now is, well, not only because they're 100 years old, but because we want to increase the capacity of that bridge, we'll do, we'll do bridge projects to increase the capacity. So 286,000 pounds is our goal for all bridges that we own. That is one of our goals. And of course, maintain assets in a state of good repair. We want to keep the railroads running. And our other goal that's in our statewide rail plan, and we are actually working on our statewide rail plan as we speak. But our number one goal for passenger rail is to extend the Vermonter, and so it doesn't stop in St. Albans, it goes all the way to Montreal. So,
Representative Burke?
We have our annual conversation
about when?
For context, my first year here in 2009, the program would be about 2 or 3 years before the train got to Montreal. So things are moving. And I want to know, I know since Brian Searles passed, is there somebody who's taken up his role in terms of communicating with the Canadians?
Yeah, so I am currently meeting with Quebec, Amtrak, State of New York, at least once a month, but recently it's been twice a month about the Montreal project. One of the things that's happened in the agency, and this is one of the reasons why we've separated aviation and rail, so I have more time now to focus on Montreal. So I don't believe we're going to replace Brian. I think I'm going to pick up that slack at this point. Yeah, we're having a lot of meetings about Montreal. And I will have some news that I can't talk about yet because it's something that Quebec is doing. It's nothing I'm doing, but Quebec is working on a report, and that's going to come out hopefully soon. And I will love to share it with this committee because it's sort of the next step on what they're doing. So if you look about the infrastructure, how do we get there, right? So what do we need? We need a pre-clearance facility in Montreal. And what a pre-clearance facility is the train won't stop at the border. You're going to get on in St. Albans. It's going to go all the way to Montreal. And much like an airplane, you get off, you go through customs when you get there. Or you go through customs before you get on the train, and the train doesn't stop on the border, you just come right into the US. So that's where we are. We're working on that piece right now, and there's a report about that coming out soon. The infrastructure in the state of Vermont, from St. Albans up through Alberg, is mostly done. If we could run passenger trains today from St. Albans to the Canadian border, but when you get to the Canadian border, obviously that's not in the States. We don't control what's in Canada. That section of track, it's about 8 miles from Alberg to Kantic. That section of track needs to be redone. It's not ready for passenger service. So that's, how do we get that done, right? So we have a hard time saying, hey, Canada, fix your tracks or
Be a
change
next
it.
Canada then.
So anyway, but we do have good partners there. We do have good partners there that are focused on it. So,
Right.
And I think it is moving. It's just not moving as fast as we want.
But they still have to build this pre-clearance facility.
And the pre-clearance facility, you wouldn't believe the red tape, right? Because you've got Canadian Customs, US Customs, Amtrak, you've got privately owned rail station. So there's a lot of players in the middle of this. And then funding in Quebec is different than in the US and how they can fund railroads, private railroads. So that's a very big complicating factor here. Who's paying for it and who can pay for it, actually. So anyway, there's a lot of moving parts. And I know every year I come in here and I say, we're working on it. And we really are.
I understand that, yeah.
But the unfortunate part is it's in a different country that I can't steer it as quick as I would like, but very political.
Well, thank you for your work.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Representative McCoy?
So remind me again, are there any train tracks on this red line that you have there currently?
Yes,
Okay.
freight runs there today.
Okay,
But the problem is freight runs there at a very slow speed. And when you want to put passengers on a train, they don't want to go 10 miles an hour on a train. They'll take their car, right? So you need to make it so that it's efficient and that it works. Otherwise, people will just get off the train in St. Albans and drive their car and beat the train there by 2 hours. That's not what we want.
so the line from St. Albans to the border, do we have a train track there?
From St. Albans, yeah, there's a train, the tracks are there.
Okay,
And we have upgraded the tracks from St. Albans to the Canadian border. We actually have done that. but we can't go any further, right? I can't work in Canada. So.
I think we can. I think we can.
That's
Do you have
right.
dual citizenship or anything?
Just for the record, I don't want to say you're going in the wrong direction. You need to go. Want that for the record.
For the newer members. Yellow is what Representative Corcoran is referring to. And
That's more realistic option.
So I will tell you that in the rail plan, that yellow is part of the rail plan as either, it's either, we're looking at it two ways. Looking at it is either an additional Ethan Allen service down through all the way to Bennington, or a possible reroute of the existing further into Vermont and then over to New York. But anyway, we're looking at both of those. So it's in the rail plan.
There we go.
Because we need to build.
Yeah.
All right, so a little more deeper dive into the bureau. So we've broken our bureau up into a few different sections. We have a property management section, and our property management section does, licenses, leases, if a utility wants to cross over a railroad, if somebody wants to put a driveway across a railroad or a rail trail, we still manage rail trail property management side of it. So that's kind of what the property management stuff guys do. And if there's an encroachment, say somebody starts, building a shed out in their backyard and they're on railroad property, even though they don't know it, we deal with that type of stuff. So crossings, any type of crossings, whether it's utility, driveways, or anything like that, that's kind of what the property management folks do. Project delivery, Paul Libby. He runs all the projects that come through the rail section, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the projects in a second. So that's what project delivery does. So again, culverts, rail upgrades, rail crossings, bridges, that type of stuff. We have a bridge management section. That's Aaron Charbonneau is the head of our bridge management section. We have to do annual reporting for the FRA that says all those 172 bridges, we've inspected them all. We know what they can carry. We know they're safe. So annually, we do bridge inspections on all 172 bridges annually, and we have to send a report to the FRA. FRA is Federal Rail Administration. We also have someone that runs the Amtrak, manages the Amtrak contract, and also Operation Lifesaver. Operation Lifesaver is a national railroad safety program that VTrans sort of took on the Vermont role. So every state has an Operation Lifesaver program. And VTrans, we sort of run the state safety program. So we have a person that goes around to driver's ed, high schools, truck driver trainings, even first responder trainings, talk about anything that's sort of safety related around a railroad and what you do if there is an incident. So a lot of training. We try to get out there and try to spread the word that, it is trespass if you're walking down a railroad, keep off the tracks, and everybody thinks they can hear a train coming, but I'm telling you, it's on you before you know it. All right, so some of the federal requirements we have to follow. In 2008, there was something called PREA 209 that the federal government said Amtrak used to subsidize. The federal government used to subsidize passenger trains through Amtrak. They stopped that in 2008 and said if your train 750 miles or less, then the states that train runs through has to incur the cost of that passenger service train. So, like our Vermonter service, we split that cost with Connecticut and Massachusetts, and then the Ethan Allen, we have a cost split between Vermont and New York. The FRA, we have Title 49, Part 237, which is the bridge safety standard. I was talking about that earlier, that mandates that we own the asset. We have to inspect it annually, and we have to send them a report that says this bridge can handle this capacity at this speed. So not only do we talk about how much can it physically hold, but how fast a train can go over that bridge. So that's important. We do that every year. And then I was talking about the highway side, where we have a highway crossing improvement program, and we have to provide for the safe crossing condition at railroad highway intersections, and that's a requirement from federal highway. Talking about a project, so I just pulled up one. This is a project we did this past summer. This is in Shaftesbury 58. You can see that we had a bridge. This is just an example. We still have it. We have a build grant that it does the improvements on 29 rail bridges between Rutland and Hoosick, New York. And this is just one of them that we did last summer. There's 29 bridges in that grant that we are improving. And you can see on the left, this was built, there's a bridge that was built over 100 years ago. The stones were failing so bad that they put in a timber bent underneath it just to support it. The timber bent was failing. So we had to take that all the way out and replaced it with a modern structure that is not only stronger, but it also increases the capacity for hydraulics, so more water can flow through it. And if we, as we talk about these big flood events, this has been designed for the 100-year flood, and it should be able to handle additional capacity of hydraulics. On the public rail highway crossing, this is just sort of the last couple of years of data. We look at every single crossing, and some crossings have more than one track. So we actually pulled data on not only each crossing, but each track within the crossing, and we put them into a condition rating, 4 to excellent. That goes into our priority system, which then goes into projects that we put into our budget. So I talking a little earlier about property management and what they do. So they map all rail and rail trail parcels. So anything we own, we have a parcel map. They create licenses. Again, if someone wants to go across it or use our property, sometimes there's excess property. Sometimes if you look at the railroad, we may own the parcel that is, 100 feet away from the railroad. We're not really using it. Someone wants to use it. We might lease it out to somebody to use it for something. So they do that. I was talking about enforcement. If someone comes onto our property using it, we'll go out and deal with the encroacher. So again, I was talking about lease excess rail property. And then we manage our state-owned Amtrak stations, which we own. We own Burlington, we own Virgins, we own Whitehall Junction. Bridge management program, I was talking a little bit earlier, 172 bridges that were required to have inspections annually. Right now, so we've been making a lot of improvements over the past several years. So we do ratings as far as like the actual detailed rating per bridge. We don't do all 172 every year. We kind of have them in a cycle. So we're scheduled to do 11%, 19 of those in the budget year we're in right now. So 160 out of 172, or 93% of them currently meet 286,000 pounds. So 12 of our bridges do not. And for those of you that have been here in this room for a bit, you'll know that number has come up significantly. 10 years ago, I think we were only about 100 out of 172. So we've made significant improvements over the last 10 years. So 3 bridges are considered serious and 9 bridges are poor. So that number is also reduced over the last several years. So why? Because, most of these bridges are over 100 years old, and they were not designed at the standard that railroads run at today. So we have had a lot of immediate and emergency projects, mostly because of Mother Nature has really thrown some stuff at us. But, we definitely are working every year for Mother Nature kind of hits us last July 10th. That's a bad day, I guess, every year. So sometimes we do have to put a Band-Aid fix, but we keep the railroads open and then we program a project. And then, depending on the funding, we keep prioritizing bridge projects. So that's what bridge management does. They look at every bridge every year and then prioritize it through our system to see where it fits into our program. And that's kind of what we do in the rail section. Any questions? Or was I that thorough?
I don't have a question, but I think that Ray might be interested to know what's in that picture on the bridge that,
Oh. This is what's called a snooper truck. V-Trans bought this snooper truck, I'm gonna say, we're probably 8 or 9 years ago now. And why we have this is because it's obviously has to have rail gear on it so it can run down the railroad. So it's not just a typical truck. It was specially built for rail inspections. And it can get in some pretty tight spaces. So what you can't see in this picture is there's a basket underneath the bridge and there's guys in the basket looking underneath the bridge right now. So you gotta have some guts to have that job. But anyway, that's this is a snooper truck that V-Trans owns. V-Trans employees do the bridge inspections on the rail assets, on the rail bridges. So yeah, we did that probably 8 or 9 years ago, maybe. Yeah.
there was a move to buy it.
It saved us a ton of money because we have to do these annually, and to hire this out, this specialty truck, they know what's special in the private industry and they charge you for it, right? So buying this was a good move for V-Trans for sure.
Representative Pouch?
Are there any new regulations like positive train control or track control, whatever that's called? Anything like that coming down the pike that Vermont's not meeting, but we will have to meet, or any changes like that come, big ones?
Okay, so positive train control, for those of you who don't know, I'll give you a little background on that. So positive train control is a system that is built into the tracks where it knows exactly what's on the track. So if you were a snooper truck or if you were an actual train, there is electronic software that knows, it kind of tracks you down the tracks. And if there were two trains or maintenance vehicles coming at each other, it would literally automatically shut those vehicles or trains down so they could not collide. Positive train control has sort of regulations about if you have so many trains, you trigger positive train control. Vermont does not have that many trains. Like if you were in Chicago where there was a train every 5 minutes, right? And it's just, there's always a train. Yeah, positive train control makes sense. But when you have, 2 or 3 trains a day, it's a different safety standard. So it's just, you don't have that many, they're not on the track. So how we do it in Vermont is you have to have track warrants, which means there's a dispatcher that is controlling that from dispatch. And if you're a train and you say, I want to go from milepost 1 to milepost 20, they say, okay, here's your track warrant. You own that track. I'm not going to let anybody else on between 1 and 20. And that's how we do it in Vermont. We don't do it electronically. We do it through dispatch. So the regulation isn't changing. We just don't meet the standard of needing PTC right now. That makes sense.
Is there any expectation that they bring that in, or are we looking okay now?
So
It sounds like a big cost.
well, it's a big cost not only for like the infrastructure, actually making the trains outfitted to have all the PTC equipment in the track, but you also think about every maintenance vehicle, every snooper truck, every train, those all have to be outfitted with PTC as well, because those need to control the actual vehicle to say, I'm automatically going to stop. So it's an expense initially, but it's also a maintenance expense, like to keep it up to date. So I don't think we're going to meet that standard in the near future. I wouldn't expect that we would.
Yeah, the question does spark a bit of one of your future presentations, sort of the idea of when trains go through, which routes on which times, and when your future, if there's only a handful of trains a day that are running, it'd be kind of interesting to see on which tracks at what time of the day, if there really is only a handful. I don't want to make an overall huge project for you, but in the future, it'd be kind of interesting because we obviously know the Vermont goes out and then Ethan Allen goes out, but up our way, there's a chip train, but beyond, and then there's Canadian National, whatever it is comes through, but other than that, I don't know what's on the rail when. It's kind of interesting. If there are really only a few of them, that'd be interesting to see, but please represent that, or if you have a comment on it.
So I just want to, so if I can just comment on it. So passenger trains are scheduled, freight trains aren't. So freight trains can run any time of day, 24/7 in any direction. So freight trains are typically not scheduled, although I will tell you, a lot of the trains do run in a similar window, but they don't have to. So they can run anytime, any day. But the passenger trains are scheduled because people need to know when to meet the train, right? So freight trains aren't scheduled.
Although they seem pretty consistent.
Yeah, they are, they tend to be, but they don't, my point is they don't have to be. So
Interesting.
if you ask the railroad, when's the train coming, they're gonna say anytime.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, thanks. So I represent Shelburne, where we have sort of the worst of both worlds. We have, a lot of trucks coming through our village on Route 7, and we also have, you know, the rail line, it is sort of parallels that. So I guess I'm wondering, what is our, you know, what are our goals? We would love to get rid of some of the trucks. You know, we're trying to have a more walkable, livable village, and that would help. Realizing that that would then shift more trucks or more freight to rail, just I think fine. But what are the sort of barriers that we are looking at statewide to kind of growing a more robust freight line? And what could we perhaps do to support your group in making that better in the future, whatever that means?
Yeah, no, we definitely support more rail traffic, so that we can, reduce the wear and tear on our roads, right? So, we have, we continuously work with railroads and shippers and receivers, and also new customers. Like if there's a new business that's, not everything can ship on rail, but the heavy stuff, we do get calls every year that say, hey, I'm a whatever, I move this commodity. Is it possible to move my commodity on rail? And we always work with them and see if it works. So one of the things that we run into is rails run where they run. And if you're a business, you need to have a property right up next to it, right? So finding the right property in the right town, say Shelburne or whatever, finding the right property that can ship or receive adjacent to a railroad is sometimes a problem. But we do work with a lot of people every year. A lot of people, they have that idea. Geez, I'd love to put my stuff on a train. So we work with people, and we do have. It's a bit old now, but we went through several years ago and we sort of identified what we considered, they're privately owned, but what we considered parcels large enough to be a shipper receiver adjacent to a railroad. And we gave that to the marketing folks at all the railroads, so that they had it. So I don't know, we do work on that. I don't know how we make it better like immediately, but we definitely think that way you're thinking is how do we get it on there? So.
Yes. Last couple of questions. I'm not sure where we were at here. Representative McCoy. I guess.
So I just, Amtrak's been running from Rutland to Burlington for a couple of years now. So have there been any issues with the speed of Amtrak, especially in Shelburne? Because they've had freight right along, but that's a much slower pace than when Amtrak goes through. Have you heard of many complaints?
We haven't had any problems so
Okay,
far.
no complaints around, I don't
No,
know.
we did a lot of Operation Lifesaver, did a lot of outreach. We did a lot of training ahead of that train to say, hey, we're gonna have a train coming through the village of Shelburne at 59 miles an hour.
Right.
So it's, yeah. And of course, we set up all the, crossings and the gates and the lights and all those things. We set them up so that they come down so that the train at 59 miles an hour, we set them up at the right speed. So, yeah, thankfully, so far.
I can speak to that really quickly. It has been a challenge our school gets out and there are people, parents with kids in their car are sometimes sitting on the rail lines. I know. I mean, but like, there's nothing coming, but there could be something coming, right? And so there's a lot of back and forth in the community and reminding people of the dangers, et cetera, but it still happens. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's not great.
Representative White?
Thank you for the presentation. And I have a question about, like, are there opportunities with the Vermont Rail regarding public transportation? Like, we've got the rail that's going from Burlington down to Middlebury, Rutland, et cetera. The other one coming through Waterbury. I mean, have we looked at, could there be a rail that goes up like 5 o'clock on Saturday and comes back at 11 o'clock so that people who want an urban experience from the rural area can take the train up and back for the evening, and vice versa, if people in Burlington want to find a rural experience? Right now they're running once a day, which is great, but in terms of helping Vermonters get around Vermont, are there opportunities that we're not seizing on?
So we looked into this. So the Amtrak service is what's called an intercity passenger service. So it runs longer distance, right? But what you're referring to, I believe, is something more called a commuter service. We've looked into commuter trains, even most recent years, 2-3 years ago. The numbers aren't quite there.
In terms of who you expect to use it?
Yeah, so the numbers, the way, and again, we did a little kind of a higher level, but it didn't really support the cost of what a train would cost for, say, Middlebury, Burlington, once, twice a day or whatever, as a commuter. You got to remember, state of Vermont has about 600,000, a little over 600,000 people. We talk about places that have commuter services. You've got cities that are 600,000 commuting to cities that are 600,000. So there's quite a bit different density of population where commuter trains work. Vermont, we're not quite there yet, from what we can see.
Okay. Dan Delabrie. Thank you very much. We're going to transition live. We're going to stay on live and transition to our next presenter, I believe is in the room. And thank you very much. And Amy Bell is going to be coming up to join us and talking about her planning and research group in the Agency of Transportation.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. As the chair said, I'm Amy Bell. I'm the Bureau Director for the Policy Planning and Research section. And I have 15 minutes and 6 slides, so this shouldn't take too awfully long. You can see me up there.
Okay. Get it to work. We're having trouble with the plug-in part. I hope it's the bottom part is plugged in. We'll have to send Representative Campbell. Oh,
I wiggled it.
well, your colleague over. It worked though, so we're good.
Right.
We're rolling to the next piece.
Well, like I said, thank you for having me, and I've got just 6 slides to go through, give you a quick overview of what our section does. I'm Amy Bell. I'm the Bureau Director for the Policy Planning and Research section. People oftentimes say, well, what does policy planning and research do? And I think the best way to describe it is we're the incubator of ideas for the agency. We provide services to all parts of our agency, not just our particular division. So we're one of 5 of the 5 bureaus within the Policy Planning and Intermodal Development Division, which Michelle, because she's over in the corner over there. She is the director of our division. And Policy Planning and Research is just one of those sections, along with rail. And you're going to be hearing, I can't remember if you've heard from public transit, environmental policy and sustainability, and I'm forgetting one. Oh, aviation. So basically, as I said, we're the incubator of ideas. We take all the new federal, it could be some federal initiative that comes forward, a state initiative that comes forward. It could be a recommendation from all of you for a legislative study that's necessary. So all of those ideas come to us. We convene internal stakeholder groups within the agency of staff, as well as external groups. So it could be advocacy organizations, the League of Cities and Towns. Just depends on the issue who is brought in to participate in those discussions. And lots of initiatives that now are very large parts of our agency all had their beginnings in policy planning and research. And I'll give you a few examples. There's something called the Transportation Resiliency Planning Tool, which is something that you'll be hearing about when environmental policies. That had its start in policy and planning. They start out as small ideas, we figure out how to implement them, then hand them off to other staff in the agency. And then there are also sorts of, we've got something called our Intelligent Transportation System that had its beginnings decades ago in the policy planning and research section. So we are the ones that sort of start these ideas, help them get root, and then we hand them off to other parts of the agency. So here's the organization, or this is just specific to the Bureau. You can see me in the top there in the green, and I report directly to Michelle. We have 5 sections within the Bureau. We have the research section, the policy and planning section, which consists of both our policy development, federal level policy development, as well as implementation and review of what's going on at the federal level. Then we also have just the policy folks at our level, primarily state level, which Dave Pelletier oversees. And then we have a planning manager, Matthew Orancio, and he oversees what's called our Transportation Planning Initiative, which is our cooperative, our 34-year cooperative relationship with the 11 regional planning commissions in the state. Very successful. I'll talk a little bit more about it later. And then we have a section called the Development Review and Permitting Services. And in Development Review, there's something called Section 1111 permits. And what they are is highway access permits. And that section is responsible for implementing that part of state statute related to any commercial or residential access point to the state highway system. And then we also have one individual who oversees and reviews all Act 250 applications. The agency is a statutory party to Act 250 applications, so he reviews them, analyzes whether there's a need for us to participate. He also then convenes all the folks from all the various modes, depending upon what the particular proposal might be, to provide input on any conditions or concerns that we as an agency might have, we might want incorporated into a permit. And then he also oversees something called Act 145, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. And then we have our mapping section, and this, you can't go anywhere in the State House or anywhere in state government and not see a product of our mapping section. They are basically the ones who do all of the base layer development for all information related to transportation infrastructure in the state. So very important function that we have, and it's all geographic information based. You'll hear GIS and the acronym used, and we have that section within our Bureau. And then just to give you a little breakdown, and I'm not going to go through all of these, I'm just going to give you some highlights of like what do the individual sections do. I mentioned policy and planning. They do a lot of our work on all the reauthorization bills. So right now we've got a staff member who's very closely following what's going on in DC because we're in the process of a reauthorization bill for the next federal transportation bill. We do a lot of work, all the legislative monitoring. So all of that, what you folks are doing over here and other committees are doing, we have staff who are monitoring that as well. We do all of the long range planning for the agency. So we have a long range plan that we develop and update every 8 to 10 years. And then we also have modal plans. So each of the individual modes in the agency have their own plans. These are all required more often than not by the federal government. So we're the ones who actually staff those, may hire consultants to assist us if necessary, but all those things have their origins with us. We also do all of the cross-border initiatives and international agreements. You were talking about taking rail across the border. Our staff are very much involved with those conversations. Anything related to cross-border issues, for example, upgrades at either of the border crossings, those again all come, we have staff who participate in those conversations. And then a really big thing that goes on in policy and planning is our discretionary grant applications. So there's been a lot of focus under the IIJA, the last reauthorization bill, on discretionary grant programs. So we've got a staff person who actively submits those applications, and we've been very successful in bringing in additional funding for projects under law. So move on over to the Transportation Planning Initiative, and I think some of you in the room are somewhat familiar with that. But this, as I mentioned, is our 34-year cooperative relationship that we've had with the regional planning commissions. And it's been such a successful effort that it actually became the model for creation of a federal requirement that all states engage regional transportation organizations in their statewide transportation planning. And we also have the MPO, that's Chittenden County's Regional Planning Commission, is the only metropolitan planning organization in the state. And they're different in that they actually have a set aside amount of funds that goes directly to them. It's a formal federal and state designation, and these funds go directly to them. But we, again, our staff oversees the administration of those funds, and we're the liaisons between our MPO and VTrans. I think there's some really other important things. This is sort of where we have this relationship with the regional planning commissions, and they're kind of an extension of us in many ways. They're out in the community. They have regional transportation advisory committees. I think some of you may have served on those or may be familiar with those. But those are the organizations, those individuals representing the municipalities then provide feedback to the regions, which then filters back up to VTrans. So it's a really important sort of arm and outreach for us that we achieve through our relationship with the regional planning commissions. And they do a lot of work for us, but they also do a tremendous amount of technical assistance to municipalities. And I think that's one that's really, really important here, whether it's inventorying data, culverts and road conditions, to helping them with capital budgeting is another example of the kind of work the regions are able to provide to their member municipalities through our grant program. And then I mentioned the mapping program, mapping section. And one of the things, probably the most important function that they have that you all hear about is they're the ones who do all the town highway maps and the mileage certifications. And those are necessary because that's how the town highway aid formula is applied. It's based on any additions or changes in local road mileage annually. And so those numbers, it's really important that they be as exacting as possible. And then there's a tremendous amount of federal and national highway data that we're required to submit to the federal government, and those folks also oversee that effort. And I mentioned all the cartographic stuff. And then any highway additions or reclassifications or discontinuances, you've probably heard of those kind of things at the local level as well. Our mapping folks are engaged in that. So we have a research section, consists of just 2 staff people. It's federally mandated. We have to have a research section, and they basically oversee all things related to research and the incorporation of innovations in what we do. So whether it's an innovation for a new binder to go in asphalt, all the way up to studying the effects of smart growth on transportation habits. It goes the full gamut of very specific materials related things to very much more research, sort of higher level, sort of academic research as well. So it's very broad based. And we have an annual research symposium, which they put on, and usually have around a couple hundred people who come, including representatives from UVM and all the research organizations and institutions in New England. I mentioned development review and permitting services before. This is where the state highway permits are issued, our Act 250 application review, and then I mentioned Act 145. And this was implemented back in 2014, and it is where the agency is permitted to establish and assess transportation impact fees for projects that receive Act 250 permits. They're very small amounts. It was intended at the time to help address feedback we were getting from the development community that many developers it's something called last one in. So it's the last developer who used up all of the capacity on a roadway was being required to address that need and oftentimes fund millions of dollars in improvements as a result. So the Act 145 fee process is an attempt to get incremental contributions from developments that occur along a given corridor over time, so that we don't have that situation where the person at the end ends up incurring all of the expense to add capacity to the road. It's been very successful. We're in year 11. We're about to actually undertake a little investigation and report into how effective it's been, but we've gotten no negative feedback, interestingly enough. The development community seems to be very pleased with it. I think they always said all along, what we need predictability, and it's very predictable. And I think that really helps them as they're developing their individual development projects.
Sure. People, your crew, all these different sections, do I envision this in one major area? Are they all remote and all over the state? How do you manage all these people located? In different sections of-
We're all located at Berry City Place in Berry. And we're all geographically in about the same location in the building, except for a mapping section. They happen to be down on one floor because they have they co-use some equipment that our right-of-way section uses. All of our plotters that plot out these maps are down there, and it's just easier to have them together because they're using co-using the equipment.
Thank you, Representative Powell.
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple of questions. One is my understanding of the Regional Planning Commission and the Municipal Planning Commission, the one of Burlington, I guess, Burlington area. So all those funds from the federal government for planning actually are managed by the AOT?
For Chittenden County, yes. They are administered through us, yeah. For the MPO, the MPO is what's considered a direct recipient of federal funds, but it has to come through an administrative entity, and VTrans is that entity. So they have a contract with us. We work with the federal government, so it's really more of a pass-through. We don't have the ability, for example, it has to be planning eligible work, but we don't have the ability to tell them what to do. It's pretty much their funds to figure out how they want to utilize those funds.
So in some.
On transportation planning.
Okay, so that's good. And then the second, how much cooperation does your group do with the UVM Transportation Research Group, which we got to see last year?
Yeah.
Seemed impressive anyway.
Yeah, we have a fair amount of interaction. In fact, I think Michelle is actually on their advisory board for the Transportation Research Center at UVM. And our research director and many of our staff are in regular contact with, and we have a number of research initiatives ongoing right now with UVM. There are other academic institutions that do research for us as well, but we have a number that are through UVM or collaborations with UVM and some of the other organizations that they're working with.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Amy, thanks for coming in this morning. I think you got through your slides and we're only a couple of minutes behind, and that was not your fault. You inherited it and nailed it with your time frame, and we're gonna move and stay live from one Amy to the next.
And we used to have cubicles next to each other, and there was another Amy on the other side, so it was confusing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Need to go.
Good morning and welcome, Amy.
Good morning. It's an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you. I'm Amy Tatko. I'm the Director of Communications and Public Outreach. And I'll provide just a very general high-level overview of the work that I'm responsible for. And I don't have slides to share today. It's pretty straightforward.
Dare to be different.
Right. Yeah, take note. The communications lady says you don't need slides. So I have been in this position for almost 6 years now. And we are currently a team of one. So I am it. I am tasked with taking care of all the external and internal communications needs for the agency and the DMV. The first area is press releases, and this includes the agency and the department's press releases, all of the outgoing news that we deem worthy of that level of keeping the public apprised of what is going on, any changes, any new programs, and big projects. That also includes, which is a fairly recent change, the DMV enforcement section is now responsible for commercial motor vehicle crash reports, crash inspections, and we issue a press release for each one of those to the press, and they tend to get more interest than some of the other news. Press inquiries are the incoming requests that we get from the press for information and interviews. Our agency has a policy to connect the press with our subject matter experts. So I am not in front of the camera. You will not see spokesperson. What you will see in the press is the person with the knowledge who is on the ground doing the work, speaking directly to the press. So it's my role to coordinate that. Fortunately, I've been here long enough that I know who's who among these 1,200 some odd people. So I usually get it right the first time who to go for, but we have great camaraderie and support networks at our agency. So I will be quickly pointed in the right direction. I think it's worth noting that there is a very supportive spirit in our agency and taking very seriously our responsibility to the press and the public. And even though we do have members of our staff who cringe a little bit when they find out they need to be on WCAX because it's nerve-wracking and maybe not expected in their day, we are extremely responsive not only to press inquiries, but also to public inquiries. Vermonters are very engaged, earnest people. We hear from them often about everything. They don't usually call to say, we love you, thanks for the potholes. So that is a busy part of the job. And again, my role is to listen. Sometimes I can provide the information. And usually though, I wind up passing them off, and typically the staff person will respond that day or first thing the next day. And I do get a lot of really positive feedback from the public, everything from, oh, you answered the phone to, emails of appreciation to follow up. And, just as one example, a woman called and said there was a stretch of highway somewhere in northern Vermont. And she was really concerned about the line striping and felt that with the snow and ice that it was really creating a hazardous situation. We had it restriped within, I think, 36 hours. And she emailed me periodically when she drove that stretch of road just to re-emphasize her gratitude and for our responsiveness. Social media, yes.
Yeah, thank you. So is it, we get lots of inquiries too from people about, things on the highway. And there's an email that, and is it fair to say people will get some level of response?
We respond to every single inquiry, every single one. Yeah, whether it's phone or email.
Right.
As promptly as we can. And I think often with more detail and engagement than the public expects. So I am actually quite proud of that.
Well, if you're able to strike roads in 36 hours, I can certainly understand.
I'll remember that.
Where we need to go.
And to whatever degree this is useful to you, you can always send people in my direction and I can help route them to the right person. Social.
I think Representative Burke, do you have anything?
No, just
Sorry.
making comment.
Okay. I don't want to miss anybody, but thank you very much.
Sure. Social media is, of course, another way that we communicate outward to the public and receive their comments back. Facebook comments are a whole area of entertainment and challenge. The agency has a presence on Facebook. We have about 54,000 followers. And X, or formerly Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, which we primarily use to promote, individual work, workforce type issues. One area where social media has been very effective is for recruitment. I will often hear either from our HR recruitment specialist or hiring managers if they're struggling to fill a position. And this could be after a first round of hiring, they just weren't able to, to find the right candidate. Or right from the get-go, if there's a very specialized position and they know it's going to be hard to find the right person. And we have found over time, there seems to be a pretty direct correlation between our recruitment posts, especially on Facebook, and seeing an increase not only in the quantity of applications, but the quality of candidates. So recruitment is a really important area of support for public outreach. Highway safety is always a priority. Sometimes as often as weekly, I will post some kind of upbeat, friendly reminder about the importance of driving safely. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later because we do paid ads for that as well. We promote Amtrak service and the Vermont Rail Trails, the 4 trails that are owned and managed by the state on our social media. And then we also have a program that we call Push the Positive. And this is our way of showing to the public on an ongoing basis the diversity of people, programs, projects, all of the things that are going on at the agency that the public may not be aware of, that we either would like to boast about a little bit, or just be sure that, you know, we are keeping a really robust and engaging storytelling, you know, outgoing stories to the public about the work we do. Paid communication campaigns are taken seriously. It's public money that's being spent to create advertising. So this is usually people will come to me with their communication needs, and it's my job to kind of discern what the best channels are going to be. There is a lot of money through NHTSA, the National Highway Transportation
Safety Administration.
Thank you, Amy. Glad you're still in the room. For highway safety messaging. There was a time going back several years ago when that money had dried up, and now there is quite a bit of money for that communication. While we can never make any correlation between the number of crashes and fatalities and the amount of messaging that we're putting out, we're going to keep messaging it as much and as effectively as we can. You know, our thinking is if one person sees an ad and decides to start wearing their seatbelt, that's a success. So going back several years, we completely revamped our approach to highway safety. My thought coming in, and my partner, who's the lead communications person in the highway safety office, was that the scare tactics, the finger pointing, don't do this, don't do that, just didn't seem to resonate, especially here in Vermont. So we turned the whole thing around for a very Vermont tone, Vermont feel, we hope. It's called Drive Well Vermont. And the idea is Vermonters are good people who want to do the right thing for themselves and for others. Let's talk to people from that common place. So we have rolled out all of the key program areas: impaired driving, distracted driving, speed and aggression. We had a program on motorcycle safety, one geared toward teen drivers, new and young drivers. And we use social media, paid social media ads, radio, and a video that runs on television. So that is ongoing. I would encourage you to take a look at the website. This is a separate standalone website. If you just Google Drive Well Vermont, just spend a few minutes there. It'll give you a sense of the messages we're trying to get out. Another area where we've spent money on paid communications is the rail trail system. I would imagine you're all familiar with the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail and its very challenging history in the last couple of years.
You can't put a little money in there.
I'm a cyclist myself and was very excited to do the 93-mile end-to-end ride with the governor a couple summers ago. And it was unbelievable to wake up that Monday morning and to see our Saturday ride and much of the trail disappear. And then, of course, it did it again a year later. So promoting the trail is a unique area of work. As I explained to my colleagues, we have never spent money to say, come to Vermont and drive on Route 12. It's really terrific. We're sure you'll love it. But that's what we do for the rail trail, because it makes sense to spend some of the federal money that goes into that rail trail management to promote the trail for Vermonters and for people out of state. So we have ads that have run throughout the Northeast and in Canada as well. We also have a separate standalone website. If you Google the Vermont Rail Trail System, you can see what we have up there.
Representative Paul?
So when you're advertising, do you also include the other 3 trails that we have in Vermont, or just specific?
We do. We have two different categories of ads. Some are LVRT specific and some are for the whole system.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
And then the final area where we've put some money in paid advertisement is to support the DMV modernization project. I'm sure you're all familiar with that as well. Our tagline for that was don't wait in line, go online, which is the main message we want to send out to Vermonters, that with these outdated systems, computer systems being replaced, there are a lot of services that folks can do online, as well as making an appointment online. So we have ongoing advertisement. It's what we call evergreen. The ads make sense, whether it was 6 months ago or 6 months from now. And then we update them as the modernization team, launches new services online. Another important area of work that I wanted to mention is our public information consultants. This is a group of 6 firms that are under contract to provide public outreach for every one of our active construction projects that will have a traffic impact. My job is to kind of sit in the middle and coordinate between our project managers, our engineers who are leads on these projects, and our public information consultants, who quite literally start by going door to door and developing a stakeholder list, which then receives a weekly email update throughout the construction season. And I would encourage all of you, as we kind of get active again in our construction projects in April, if you go to our website, it's easy to find the page where you can sign up for projects. So if there are active construction projects in your area, you will receive a weekly email in your inbox, so you can stay apprised of what is the project, why are we doing this, what is happening right now, what was recently completed or achieved. And then we require a photo as well. As a writer, I wish this weren't the case, but a photo does, tell the story very effectively. And then we also, out of that work with our public information consultants, we produce a weekly road construction report from April through November. It's posted on social media every Sunday, and then it's on our website as well, and it goes to the media, and they do pick it up. Smaller local newspapers will just, pick out and publish the projects that, pertain to their geographic area and their readers. I wanted to mention one example of internal communications. We have a program called Inside AOT. This came out of an idea that went through our strategic workforce committee on employee engagement and retention. And there was some brainstorming about how, what can we do that would be new and interesting to folks to put the spotlight on our people internally, so that people can learn more about one another and kind of have a chance to shine in their work. So Inside AOT is basically a kind of an interview talk program. If you imagine your favorite television program where you have the host or hostess sitting there with a guest, that's me for an hour over lunch. A very simple format. It's just a Teams invitation that goes out with a bio of who the guest will be. I meet with the person ahead of time to get to know them a little bit better. We discuss, what would be good to communicate to folks during the program. And we ask everyone to keep their camera and microphone off. So it is kind of like, they're sitting back eating their lunch quietly at their desk or wherever they are. And it's just me and the guest talking. And then at the end, we open it up for questions. We usually have 35 to 40 people attend. And it's been really successful. All of the guests who have been on have enjoyed the opportunity to talk to their colleagues about their work. And sometimes new connections are made if somebody wasn't aware that a colleague in another section or division of the agency is doing work that might have some kind of relevance or overlap to their own. And the final area I wanted to mention is what I would call special projects, kind of all the one-offs that fall to me. I would imagine you have seen our Name the Plow program and the name signs that are on many of our big orange snow plows. That is a partnership between me and maintenance. It started in 2021. We ran it again in 2022 to try to get all the trucks named. We came up a little bit shy. There are 250 of the full-size trucks. And then we took a year off and ran it again in 2024. There was a little less interest. So my recommendation is to just do it every 2 or 3 years when there's a fresh crop of elementary school students. We offer it to the schools, and then each school can name a plow. And then in November, we have Vermont Plow Day, my invention, because how am I going to get, 212 plow trucks and drivers to 212 schools while our maintenance folks have a job to do. So it's one time, one day, they all go out. I have hundreds of photos and videos. I think you saw some of them in the overview video that we've shared with you. So that program has been a success. And while it is fun for the schools and our employees, it is also an important way to just plant that seed for young Vermonters about everything from highway safety to the possibility of a future career with V-Trans. Rudolph the Holiday Snowplow is another fun one that we've added in the past few years. I've lived here for 18 years. I did not know that there were all these holiday parades happening all over Vermont, but there are throughout the month of December. So we have decorated one of our orange trucks, and I'm responsible for coordinating with all of the event organizers and our maintenance team to get Rudolph scheduled, and he is always in demand. And then the last area is video work. And one example is the new agency overview video that we created in part to give all of you a visual introduction to the agency, our people, and the work we do. Sorry if I went over, I'm not looking at the time, so I hope that was useful.
Yeah.
A lot of interest here.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting. I have to say, you know, I'm impressed with everything that's happening, you know, at Facebook. So Vermont Highways, I get those notices. Vermont, the rail trail, I get those. In Heinsberg a few years ago, we had a big project, and, you know, I was tapped into that and I could see what was happening. And this week we're shutting this down, and, you know, and you know, it is very impressive, the amount of communication there. And if anybody goes to the website, I mean, everything you need to, it's hard not to find what you're looking for, and there's way more than you know, ever expecting, I think. So just impressed.
Representative McCollum.
So the signage on the highways, 89 especially, when I drive back and forth there. You know, roads will clear for Santa and Rudolph tonight. Are you responsible for that?
Sadly, for me, I am not.
Okay.
Our highway safety office has, as I mentioned, a communications lead, and she works with our transportation management center. And they
So those are
pick them
pretty
up.
cool. Yeah.
Those are pretty cool. Yeah.
And there was some controversy that federal government
Yes.
didn't want to have jokes or, you
Right.
know, quips.
There
Yeah,
was,
so now that's gone away.
it has. I mean, I think it was a good moment for us all to just pause and remember that if the joke is too weird, you have to think too hard about it, it might be distracting. You know, if it's sassy to the point of, you know, not really being appropriate, you know, that's maybe not wanted as well. But yeah, we hear from Vermonters and out-of-state visitors all the time that they appreciate the messages.
Amy, I think we'll say the committee certainly enjoyed your presentation, all the work, and thank you very much. And we're going to take a break now. We're a little bit behind, so we'll try to shrink it up closer to